Find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
Hey guys, I'm Shelby, host of Addicted to Crime podcast. Join us for deep, chilling dives into the evil nature of criminals, and let's take a closer look at their early life and background to see how they got to the day of the crime. This podcast was created in hopes you pay closer attention to your surroundings and hopefully stay safe. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, or else on the website www.addictedtocrime.org. Happy listening, thanks for your time, and stay safe.
Hey, Twisted listeners, I'm Cindy.
And I'm Viva.
And this is Twisted Listeners, a podcast about murder
And lists.
And we're brought to you by the Podmoth Podcasting Network. Check out the other podcasts. They're all great. That was my song about that.
Boop, boop,
Doop, doop, doop. And I swear to God, I promise you all, the holidays have been hard, but I am going to record a Patreon very, very soon. I swear to you.
Yes.
I've just had so many ideas and I keep changing them. But I finally, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I announce it on the podcast like an asshole, and then I don't do it. But I'm not going to say what it is. But I found a case that I have not found a single podcast that has covered it. And it's really fucking interesting. So if I can find enough information on it, which I think I can, I will be doing that. It's a mystery. Anyway. Nice. Okay. So today is part 2 of Vigilante murders. This has been a really good topic. I've been feeling it.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed, it's all the people involved, all of the people being vigilanted, as it were, to turn that into a verb, are somehow like violent sex offenders in one way or another. Yeah. That's like always what it is, which really makes this kind of a fun topic in a way. Not obviously what those people are doing, but you don't feel bad when other people handle business in a way. You know what I mean? Like I have a hard time feeling bad about any of this. So
despite them being murders, we feel less bad. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, we're trying to start the new year with something that makes you feel less terrible. But then maybe you feel guilty for not feeling bad. I don't know. I certainly don't. I hope you all don't.
No, it's okay. I mean, sometimes also there's like a lack of criminal or like investigation, a lack of police response. And it's like, well, what are these people going to fucking do? You know, like
100%. Yeah. Like the guy I did last for the first half, like he was just like living his life. And it's like, dude, obviously nobody gave a shit. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went first last time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go first now. And I'm going to do a well-known story. But I know it's well known, but I think just kind of like the major points. So I'm going to go into a little more depth. This is the story of Jody and Gary Plauche, or Plauche. I think it's Plauche. So we're going to start with Gary. Gary and his wife June lived and worked in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Gary was born in 1949. They had 3 sons and 1 daughter together. The sons were all born, all the kids I believe were born like in the 70s. Gary spent time in the Air Force as a staff sergeant, then became an equipment salesman, and later operated a camera for TV stations, which is funny, getting into this story.
Okay.
His sons were Gary Jr., who went by Bubba, Joseph, who went by Jody, and Jeffrey Michael, who went by Mikey. And his daughter, they were like, fuck this, we're just going to name her the nickname, and her name was Sissy. So Sissy was the oldest and Mikey the youngest, and Jody was somewhere in the middle. And that's basically who the majority of this story is about, is Jody. So in 1983, when Jody was 10 years old, he was already active playing basketball, playing baseball, playing football. His parents didn't have a lot of money. Like the town of, or the city, I guess, of Baton Rouge around that time had like 200,000 or so people. And a little under half were living like at or below the poverty line. And Jody's family didn't have a ton of money, but his family was like dedicated to ensuring that he got to play sports, that he got to, have a normal upbringing, which I personally like. That's my obsession, is like making sure my kid feels like he has everything he wants. So I totally like love that these parents were doing that, right?
Yeah, that's an honorable mission.
It is. It's like I don't need new clothing or like to go out to dinner all the time. I need my kid to like go to judo lessons and like, play baseball and do the things he wants to do. Like this is his time now. So I love that his parents were doing that for him and his siblings, and they were very dedicated to this. So anyway, I don't know if you guys are old enough. You're not, but some people might be. Karate was like a huge thing in the early 80s amongst like young boys and like, teenagers even. The original Karate Kid movie came out in 1984. I'm sure everybody now watches Cobra Kai or whatever on Netflix, but that's based on a movie that was released in 1984 about a kid who becomes like a martial arts expert. And it's like this whole big thing. My Name is Bruce was a really popular like spoof movie that actually Jody says he remembers going to see with his father and brothers in the theater. Well, everybody's obsessed with Bruce Lee. It's just this whole big thing, right? So when he was at school, he got a flyer for karate lessons. The three boys start going, or maybe it's just the two younger boys start going, but I think all three of them for a while took karate lessons. So their teacher is this 24-year-old named Jeff Doucet. Jeff was a known and trusted teacher in the community, and he became fast friends with all three boys, as well as their parents, Gary and June. Now, Jeff didn't have any family. He was living in the dojo, so he was kind of like a lonely guy. He didn't have much going on, but, people seemed to really like and trust him. The three boys took lessons for over a year at the dojo, but Jody got way more into it than his other brothers. At 10 years old, like I said, he was already playing all these other sports, but he dropped everything to spend all of his time at the dojo, doing as much as he could.
Nice.
Yeah, and Jeff was like, I want you to join like my karate team. We go to like I take all the kids out to the movies like once a week. We travel for like karate expos and what's it called? Like championships, whatever. I forget. I take my kid to them. I can't think of what they're called. But basically where you go and you fight and you try to like win medals and whatever. So at first June was kind of like freaked out about it a little bit. And I don't know if her brother was like a sheriff or a cop or whatever, but he had some way of looking into Jeff's background. And she was like, can you run a background check on this guy? Because like he's around my kids a lot. I just want to make sure he's like cool, if I'm going to let them go on like overnight, trips with this guy. And they looked into it and they're like, oh, he has a couple speeding tickets. I'm like, otherwise he's totally fine. So June's like, great, that's amazing. He's just like really in the community, whatever. I like him, right? So June and Gary both really liked Jeff at first. And Gary even invited him over for dinner and to their home on multiple occasions. Jody later said at one point that Gary was moved to tears because he felt so bad for Jeff not having any family. So he'd like have him over for holidays, right?
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So during this time in 1983, things started going pretty bad for Gary and June. I guess Gary had a drinking problem and June was having none of it. So they were going through kind of like a trial separation. And as you can imagine, this kind of put a lot of strain on the family. So I think having Jeff there, like with the boys, was really, really like helpful for them, right? Because there was like another adult that could take on some of the parenting duties and kind of pay attention to the kids when the adults were kind of handling this, right? But Gary started to notice that Jeff was like giving him a hard time, kind of like he would call Gary's work and say he was like driving drunk. He would do all these weird things that made Gary think that Jeff was trying to get with June. So Gary's like, oh, this young kid's trying to like move in on my wife. Things
Take
got
over
a
the
little-
family weirdly.
Yeah. So things got a little contentious there, especially because the boys were so close with him. And obviously, if Gary's having like drinking problems and whatever, like it stands to reason that like that he would just like everybody would rather be around Jeff than Gary. Gary's going to feel pretty bad about that, right?
Yeah.
So things are just kind of chugging along. And now it's February 19th, 1984. Jeff came by the house. I don't think Gary was living there at the time. I think it was just like June and the boys, and Gary was living somewhere else. Okay. And he says to June, oh, I'm going to go to my brother's house, drop off some carpet for him. I want to take Jody along with me. We'll be gone for like 15 minutes. Is that cool? And she's like, yeah, totally. Like, whatever. Get the kid out of the house. He takes them all the time, right?
Right.
And they left. And they didn't return. And after an hour, after 2 hours, the next day, June finally calls Gary and they begin trying to find them. They're worried that something horrible happened. Like, what if they drove off the side of the road? Or like,
call the cops at this point.
Yeah.
My God.
So they did. They called the cops, I think, the next morning.
Okay.
But they had just like fucking disappeared.
Wow.
Like into thin air. So Jeff was really trusted. And like I said, like they never thought that he would do what he did. But it turns out that Jeff had kidnapped Jody.
Okay.
So Gary and June go on TV pleading for Jeff to return Jody safely. And they start tracking him. And I don't know how they know this, but it must have been comforting for them to know that he was like still out and about, because it meant that, you know, Jody was probably safe. But they tracked him to Texas, where he was like potentially staying with like his brother or sister, but I don't, or mom even, but I don't think his family knew that anything was untoward. Like they thought that he had this kid. It's like his karate, you know, like apprentice or whatever. And he's taking them to like a thing, like who knows? They all seem to have no idea what was going on. And also, obviously, Jeff didn't spend time with these people. They lived in Texas. He was in Baton Rouge. Like, you know, they're not close. So the cops get to Texas and find that Jeff and Jody had left that like the night before. And they don't know where they went. Where they went is Anaheim, California. And as you can imagine, what Jeff told Jody was, we're going to Disneyland, because Disneyland is in Anaheim.
That's
right?
fucked.
Yes. So he and Jody go down there and they're there, and Jeff starts to run out of money because like
they do go to Disneyland.
No, they don't go to Disneyland. They go to a fucking motel in Anaheim, and they take a bus there because Jeff doesn't even have his own car. So
it's already fucked up to promise Disneyland and not deliver.
I know, right?
That's already fucked.
I mean, that is like the least of the issues. Wait till I get into this fucked up ass story. So they're in Anaheim and Jeff's starting to run out of money. So he calls June and starts threatening her and telling her, you need to meet me in New York. I need you to send me money. But he's telling her in New York, like to throw her off the trail of where he actually is. So it's like, how is he actually going to get the money? So none of this is well thought out, because he's telling her he needs money, but how is she going to send it to him if he's telling her to send it to New York? Like, how's he going to get it, you know? So finally, you know, June tells the cops and they tap her phone and Jody calls. Jody actually finally gets Jeff to let him call his mom. And when he does, they trace the call back to Anaheim. And this is on February 29th. So he's been gone for exactly 10 days. And also, yes, it was February 29th. It was a leap year. 1984 was a leap year. So this happened on a day that does not always exist.
Weird.
Yes. So they track them to Anaheim. They arrest Jeff. They find him at the motel and they bring Jody home. So March 1st, he's returned to his family in Baton Rouge. Now, Jeff had actually dyed Jody's hair. Jody had like light blonde hair. He dyed it black. Jeff always had a really big bushy beard and he fully shaved it. So he was trying to disguise them so they could, you know, not be found, which is really fucking scary because it feels like he really thought out the abduction part, but he didn't think about what to do after that. And I really
but he was thinking of it on some level as like a long-term thing.
He was like, he told Jody, like, I'm going to tell people that you're my son. And it's like the weird thing to me, though, and the thing that scares me is I think a lot of times with child abductions, this is how they start. And then when the abductor cannot figure out what to do with the child, they kill them. And I think that that's happened more than once because kids will be abducted and held for a certain amount of time and then murdered. And I feel like that is where this could have easily gone. So they got really fucking lucky, I think. So they bring Jody. He gets interviewed by the police, obviously, and he tells them, like, no, he didn't sexually assault me. There was no rape. But they take him to the hospital and they have him do an exam, including, like, a rape kit.
Yeah.
And those results come back that Jody was not telling the truth. He had been sexually assaulted and raped by Jeff.
God.
And once this came out, Jody decided to tell the truth. And the truth was that Jeff had been sexually assaulting and raping him for the better part of a year.
Not just the kidnapping.
Not just the kidnapping. He had been doing
God.
this as much as twice a day, every single day, because he saw Jody every single day.
Oh, that's so disgusting.
It's so fucked. And Jody, we'll talk about
Ew.
kind of where he ends up in his life later. It's actually really
Okay.
great.
Oh,
But
good.
he kind of outlines, like, he was not only grooming me, but he was grooming my family. He was getting in close with both of my parents. When he saw
abusers do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When he saw the rift between parents, he knew to get close to the mother. You know, he figured he could push the father out. Jody said also that Jeff was really jealous of Gary's relationship with Jody, of like the father-son relationship. So he was like going after him. But he spent a lot of time getting the family really used to the idea of him being around and being really close with Jody and it not being weird. You got to the point where at one of the tournaments, that's the word I was looking for, they were at a tournament, and when Jody won, Jeff kissed him on the mouth, like excitedly, and Gary saw it. And one of Gary's family members was like, "That's fucking weird." And Gary's like, "Oh, you don't know him. He would never. He's a good guy."
They were all groomed too. They were all brainwashed too.
They were all completely groomed.
It's like, this reminds me of Carrie Stainer's brother, the way that abductor wanted to like have this weird father-son thing.
Yes.
And then it also reminds me of the like, what the fuck is that Netflix documentary where like the abuser like
fucking both the parents up in what's it called? Not Up and Vanished.
Vanished in Plain Sight or something like that.
I forget what it is, but yeah,
Kidnapped
exactly.
in Plain Sight.
Yeah, exactly. The same, whatever that one is fucking called, which people are probably like screaming it at us right now. But
I know.
Exactly.
Abducted in Plain Sight.
Maybe like that's a show.
Something. It's got to be something in Plain Sight.
I can't remember. Anyway,
yeah, where he's fucking the whole family.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about both of those cases while I was like, researching this. So anyway, you know, Gary finds out about this and he is fucking pissed. Obviously, you know, they have interviews with them when Jody first comes back and he's like, "We're just so happy." And then like the next day they interview him and he's like, "I just feel so helpless," because he knows what was done to his son and he blames himself for allowing it to happen and for not like realizing, you know, what the situation is. Anyway, so I think the parents ended up getting back together, by the way. And also later, when asked why he didn't tell anybody for the year, Jody was like, "Well, one, I was 10 years old and groomed."
Yeah, he's scared.
Yeah, and I thought he was my friend. I wanted him to stop, but I didn't want him to get in trouble. Like, I didn't hate him. He was fun. He still took me to the movies. He still took me places. Like, we still had a good time.
Of course, that's what grooming is. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, he just did these things to me, but it was always over pretty quickly. And then he also said, like, I don't want to upset my parents. Like, I don't want them to be upset. So, you know, it totally makes sense. To a 10 or 11-year-old who's been groomed, like, obviously, you know, it's not, and I would never say it was his fault anyway, but obviously it wasn't. So anyway, so Gary is basically, who has this drinking problem, is living at this bar for the next 2 weeks, waiting for Jeff to be extradited back to Baton Rouge from Anaheim, because they're holding him in Anaheim and interviewing him there. And by the way, tons of kids, including other kids in Baton Rouge and kids in Texas and kids wherever else he lived, later came forward and were like, "Oh yeah, he did that to me too." So this guy had a long history of doing this.
He's like a straight up serial monster.
Yes, and he was only 25 years old at this point when he gets caught. So Gary has a friend on the force and he sees him at the bar and the guy tells him like, "Oh, he's coming back, to Baton Rouge." He then finds another friend of his from when he was a TV camera operator. And this guy's like a journalist. And he's like, "Oh, he's going to be here March 16th at 9:30. He's going to be getting off a plane at the airport and coming to be, to be put in prison here or whatever." So Gary is like, "You bet your ass I'm going to fucking be there." So Gary puts on the most like 80s disguise I've ever seen.
Yeah,
he's wearing,
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Are you looking at it? I think he's got like knee-high white, not knee-high, but like shin-high white socks, like a polo shirt tucked into the shorts, a white hat, and like really big like 80s sunglasses. And he's also got a beard. And he goes to the airport and he doesn't go inside the airport, but you also have to remember in the 80s, like airport regulations were not nearly as strict. So he tucks a gun into his boot or his shoe or whatever the fuck he's wearing and pretends to be making a phone call at a phone booth, because for those of you who don't know, before cell phones, you had to pay money and go to a phone that was like just standing out. It was just like outside in a box. And
phone booth.
Yeah, it was a phone booth. So we won't even talk about rotary phones. We'll just go as far as phone booths today. But so he's in a phone booth pretending to make a phone call. And as Jeff is being led by in handcuffs by police, Gary turns, pulls the gun out of his boot, and shoots this dude at point blank range on the right side of his face, like through his fucking temple. This was on live TV.
They were like taking him out of the to go to court or something on TV. Okay.
Well, just the news stations were there to be like, because this is a big case. Like
here's this fucking guy.
Yeah, and so on national news, and you guys, you can watch this on YouTube. It's not like gory or anything.
Right.
It's pretty crazy. So Gary shoots the guy and then just stands there and he like hangs the phone up. Like he just goes back to like doing whatever. The cops who knew him ran over and grabbed him. And you hear one of them yelling, "Why, Gary? Why?" Like, why? And you can tell he's so upset because this is his friend and he's bummed. And Gary, you don't hear this in the recording, but apparently Gary answered back, "If it had been your child, you would have done the same thing too." Yeah. And it's kind of like, yeah, very possibly.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a very clear reason why in this case.
Yeah, I know. I was like, really, dude, you got to ask why? Really?
Yeah.
But I think the guy was saying like, why are you throwing your life away is really what he meant. He knew why he wanted to shoot him, but the actual act of doing it, I think the guy was worried about Gary and worried about his family in that moment.
Sure.
Jeff Doucet did die from his wounds, basically right there on the floor outside the airport. Gary was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder, which is hilarious because this was absolutely like the most
very
first ever.
Yeah.
But he then ended up pleading no contest to manslaughter, which was part of a deal that gave him a 7-year suspended sentence, 5 years of probation, and no time inside of a prison.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. The judge concluded that it would help nobody if he went to jail. And that he was likely in a temporary state of shock and a temporary psychotic state after hearing what had happened to his son. He also concluded that Gary wasn't a danger to anyone as long as, they didn't try to do what Jeff did to any of his children, which I think is totally fair. So Jody, who I'd like to talk about, went on to be an advocate for children who are suffering from sexual abuse. He got into this because when he was like 18 or 19, he and his dad went on Donahue. I don't know if anybody remembers the show Donahue. Probably not, and that's okay. It was basically like the 80s and 90s were really big in like talk shows, like a Dr. Phil. He was basically the first Dr. Phil. Right?
I like how we've had two different like old people time corners with Cindy. We had payphones and we had Donahue. Like,
is Donahue still alive? I think he is.
No,
Phil Donahue. He had white hair when I was like 10.
No, he is 87.
80. Oh, damn. Okay. So it's fair to think he might have been dead because that's pretty old. So.
Pretty old.
Go Phil. Keep living, buddy. Anyway, so they went on Donahue and then the cop, actually the one who yelled, "Why, Gary? Why?"
Yeah.
Called Jody and was like, "Hey, I just want you to know that we're arresting a priest in Baton Rouge today because 2 children came forward and said that he'd molested them. And the first one to come forward said he did so because he saw you on Donahue." And so Jody was like, I can make a difference. Like I can help kids by doing this. So
the more kids come forward, the more people are then held accountable.
Exactly. So at one point he wrote like a transcript for like a book, but he didn't publish it until after his dad died. And I think part of that was because he and his dad actually had a really rough relationship after this went down because Jody was groomed. So that was his friend. So his dad murdered his friend and he didn't really see it for what it was.
Definitely would have complicated a little kid's like emotions at that time.
Absolutely.
And to be put through more press and more trauma and more,
so much more trauma. And, in that regard, Gary was kind of a dickhead for doing that to his kid, putting his kid and his family in that position. As it turned out, he didn't do any jail time. And Jody later came forward and was like, "I kind of think Jeff being dead actually helped me heal," which is interesting to hear.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And he said, he eventually, forgave his father. But he didn't release the book until 3 years after his father's death when he finally decided to come forward and do it. The name of the book, Why, Gary, Why?
It's a very good title.
It really is. I want everybody, you don't have to watch the whole YouTube video, just skip to the end. But the way that is shouted is fucking iconic. Like, it just really is.
Yeah.
It's a really, once you hear it, you'll never not hear it. So he worked in Pennsylvania helping with kids, and his dad had a stroke in 2004. So Jody came back to Baton Rouge to kind of help the family. His dad died at the age of 69, I believe, in 2014. And then Jody's book, I believe, came out in 2017. The year before his death, Gary, when asked if he would take anything back or do anything differently, said absolutely not. He regretted nothing and would kill the guy again if he had the chance and was in the same position. So he never changed. So now Jody is, trying to get the word out about his book. He works helping children. And the one thing in his book that I think is really great is that he helps parents identify grooming, not just grooming of their children, but grooming of themselves.
That's important. Yeah.
And he says, the one thing he says is, if another adult wants to spend more time with your kids than you do, that's a red flag.
Yeah. No adults are friends with kids. That's the important thing to remember. Like, no adults need to be friends with your kid. Like, not like family, but like outside or, people like need to be hanging out with your kids.
Yes. 100%. 100% agree. And so, and then they learned this. And unfortunately, Jody learned this the hard way and his family learned this the hard way. But I think in the end, they all came out okay. I think Jody's like a pretty well-adjusted guy, and trying to be out there and help people heal and, come forward and, so pretty fucking cool in that regard.
I'm sure that's part of helping him heal too, to help others, I'm sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah. So all's well that ends well, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was riveting, and a little Orange County in there too.
So. Yes. Yeah. A little Anaheim, little mouse town. Yeah.
Oh man. Is there a Murders of Disneyland list? No.
There's been deaths at
deaths, but not murders.
Yes, because I've actually tried to do this on the podcast before. Now that we only do 4 cases, it might be possible. We should look into that again.
Murders. There was like a big fight at Disneyland. Oh, did you see this? Someone like punched a woman in the face.
That's not surprising. Disneyland's getting pretty gnarly.
No, but I was like, who punches their girlfriend in broad daylight, like in the face?
So many people. It's so fucked. People are so fucked.
Insane. You're at the happiest place on earth. Like,
no, dude. No, I've seen so much shit go down at Disney now. There's always like screaming.
I've seen shit go down at Knott's Berry Farm. That's what I've seen.
Knott's from the dude. Yeah. One night I saw a drunk girl steal a car from a random guy in the parking lot at Knott's Berry Farm. At Knott's Scary Farm. It was insane.
Not Scary Farm. I saw a fist fight break out in the line for carne asada fries. So.
Really Knott's Berry Farm is so gnarly. Oh my god.
Wild. Yeah.
I kind of love it. I gotta take my kid there sometime. Anyway, okay.
Okay. All right.
Here we go.
So my story is a little bit shorter, but it makes up for it with a lot of punch.
Okay.
And it's kind of weird but deeply satisfying. It's a story of Diana, Huntress of bus drivers.
Dude, I forgot to highlight this and then you took it and I was like, God damn it. But I was also like, that's fair. No, I'm glad. It's such a good story though.
I'm Mexican, I call dibs.
I know. Fair enough.
This happened in Ciudad de Juarez in 2013. So here's just a 2-second version of the situation in Ciudad de Juarez that's been continuing since I don't know how long, quite a long time, at least the early 2000s, if not longer. Fuck tons of women are murdered there all the fucking time. I feel like I might have mentioned it for some other reason in this podcast before, but I forget. Just for example, in 2010, 304 women in Juarez were murdered.
Wow.
And that same year, I believe, there were mass graves found of victims that were raped and tortured in horrific ways.
Wow.
So, and these are clearly done by the same kind of organizations, I'll say, of people.
Right.
And dumped in the same sites. So it's all kind of done by one entity, not one person, but one kind of institution here.
Yeah.
The police are complicit. Everyone knows it. It's not a secret. They take part. We're pretty sure, like pretty sure, I mean, sure. And the victims are almost all poor to working class girls who are kind of walking on their way home from work, typically from maquillas, which is a kind of factory where working class girls work,
Right.
So that they're targeting a very specific class group, not rich people, right?
No, not at all.
Never. And they are, getting away with it 100%. And it's been a big, long, ongoing thing where there's activist groups and people, often from the American side, because Ciudad de Juarez, if you don't know, is across from El Paso. It's right on the border.
Right.
If you want to know more about this in particular, I strongly recommend a really, really good podcast called Forgotten Women of Juarez, I believe it is. Something like that. And it's like
Missing Women of Juarez. Maybe not.
Missing. But it's like a long, multi-part, like deep dive into this. And they go into all the people who by the way, tons and tons of people who have tried to be vigilantes or activists or speak out, get murdered themselves.
Oh, yeah.
So constantly. So it's risky to even say anything about it, especially in Juarez.
This sounds a lot like the case you did for the first half in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But in India.
Yeah, exactly. A situation where women are being preyed upon and no one is fucking helping them. And the police don't care.
Yep.
Very similar. And but the podcast goes through the victims, but then also the activists and their murders. And it's like really, really intense. So buses in this situation are typically thought to be super dangerous for women. And one woman who was interviewed by this great piece for This American Life about this case whose name was Laura, said that it was understood that if you're alone on the bus as a woman, you should, quote, hold a pen with the point facing outward, ready to stab.
Just on the bus all the time.
Yeah. And we also, if you remember, in India, I carried on murders on public transportation. I did cover a case with a very terrible bus rape.
Yes.
A famous case there where a woman was alone, but with her male friend, but that didn't matter.
Yep.
Nope. Yeah. So at the time, they also they interviewed her for this story. They did that story in 2017. A bus driver had been arrested for raping a girl who was on her way to school.
Oh, my God.
In 2005, a bus driver named Garcia Uribe had confessed to raping and killing girls. However, he later said, and probably was, that he was tortured by police into confessing as kind of a patsy for all the other murders.
So that this would stop happening, essentially? Or just
it did never stop happening, but just to be like, look, we have a guy, right? Shut up.
Right.
So there's a series of crimes by bus drivers, however, real ones.
Yes.
So Laura, on this story, this lady also told reporters a story about her younger sister, 20-year-old Maria Alejandra, who suffered an attempted rape from a man from their neighborhood. This is like a heartbreaking anecdote here, just to give you a sense of Juarez. Mm-hmm. And although Laura and her dad pled with Maria Alejandra to fucking tell the police and officially report what happened, Maria's like, no, because it's fucking useless. She did end up reporting it, and what happened? Nothing. They did interrogate her.
Oh, really? Her?
Mm-hmm. And even though a doctor did a rape kit and proved she was raped and proved she had injuries, they said, well, why don't you have bruises, though? Why did you... Why? And then they said, why did you wait to report the rape?
It's like, why the fuck do you think? I'm pretty sure exactly what's happening is why. Like, come on.
And according to Laura, the police told Maria, quote, that she would have to almost be dying for them to investigate.
Worthless pieces of shit.
That sounds like something I'd say, but the police just admit it.
Right.
You know?
Like, they're just like, no, we don't Diva doesn't have to translate for us here. Like, we're just gonna come out and fucking say the quiet
That's what
part.
they said. Yeah, they're like, oh, are you dying, though? Because otherwise we don't care.
We don't give a shit. We just
And also, if you die, we also won't care, so...
Yeah, it's funny that they even said that. Like, that's even bullshit. Like,
no, you won't investigate if she's dying either, so...
No, y'all wouldn't care no matter what. Don't lie.
No. It's weird to me in Mexico, like, why the police even exist. Like, in certain towns like this in Juarez, it's like, they're essentially a gang.
They are, yeah.
But they don't serve any police-esque, like, purpose.
They're not even, like, enforcing, like, the government's will, really. They're kind of, like, their own entity.
And this is why other gangs, which often become criminal and bad, exist. Because they form to actually enact some kind of justice and rule, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's what they come out for.
So fucking weird.
Okay, so August 28th, 2013, our main event. Early in the morning, a woman flagged down bus number 718 in Juarez. Then she walked up. As she's boarding the bus, she calmly shot the driver, who fell out and died on the sidewalk.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, witnesses saw the shooting, and it's daylight, I believe, and tons of people saw her. They described a middle-aged woman with blonde hair, which people think could be a wig. I mean, you can't, there's blonde Mexicans, but it's not as common, perhaps.
Right, but also it probably just looked really shitty like a wig because she was just trying to disguise herself. Yeah.
She also had a cap on, like a hat, so she was kind of doing a little bit of a disguise thing.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
She was wearing a plaid shirt and jeans, and it's unclear how she got away, which I like that was specified, because I like to imagine her like vaporizing into the air, like with a cape, like goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye, I'm done.
One day later, a woman got on the bus going on the same exact route, different bus, and she requested that the bus stop, you know, like, I don't know how you do that in Mexico.
Little thing. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. And as she exited, she paused, and the article says she spat the words. So that's very expressive. She didn't just say these words, she spat them. Ustedes se creen muy chingones, which means you think you're all so tough.
Oh,
into the driver's ear, and she shot him twice in the head.
Jesus. And these are just random drivers.
Yep.
Don't love that. Don't love that.
I mean, I will mention, I think I have something about this at the end, but like, I do kind of, it's possible Diana knew some stuff here.
Okay, that's fair.
It's possible. It's possible they're not random. We don't know for sure.
Okay.
Especially because, well, I don't know. Who knows? It could also be random. So the next day, a political gossip website from El Paso, like I said, is across the border, received an email that was purportedly from the killer of the two bus drivers, which is thought to be from her. And I'm going to read it. It's I believe English translation. I'm just going to read it in its entirety because it's fucking badass. And again, I do not condone random murders, but I fucking condone this message that she has.
Okay.
She says, quote, "You think that because we are women, we are weak. And that may be true, but only up to a point, because even though we have nobody to defend us and we have to work long hours until late in the night to earn a living for our families, we can no longer be silent in the face of these acts that enrage us. We were victims of sexual violence from bus drivers working the maquilla night shifts here in Juarez. And although a lot of people know about the things we've suffered, nobody defends us or does anything to protect us. That's why I am an instrument that will take revenge for many women.
Ooh.
For we are... I'm an instrument." I'm like,
oh, I love that. Yeah.
"For we are seen as weak, but in reality, we are not. We are brave. And if we don't get respect, we will earn that respect with our own hands.
Damn.
We, the women of Juarez, are strong."
Hell
and it's signed by Diana, hunter of bus drivers.
Fuck yeah, dude. Oh my God.
And this sends her into a legendary, iconic status, like right away. It's not clear, I will say 100% that the killer sent this letter, but like it's canonically thought that she did.
Also, like it couldn't have been that popular that fast that like somebody would have who wasn't her would have done that. Yeah.
It was sent pretty quick. Yeah. And the symbolism, in case you don't know your Greek mythology or Roman mythology rather, is that Diana is of course the Roman goddess of the hunt, of women and of childbirth. And she's a kind of a mythological lady icon, if you will. Yes. A badass lady of the Roman mythological world, and like her sculptures are often her with a quiver, right, with like the holding the bow and arrow and stuff. So she's like a badass huntress all the time.
Yeah,
and she's often a very muscular, tough woman goddess too. She's not like an Aphrodite, right?
Yeah, no. She's a badass. Like she's meant to be like. Yeah.
It's a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she obviously instilled fear in bus drivers, and apparently bus drivers would have. There was a sketch made of her because like 20 witnesses at least saw her in these two incidents. So they did make a sketch of her, and bus drivers would have it posted up. And sometimes women reported they were being turned away, being told that they looked like her. So the bus drivers were a little afraid, obviously.
Yeah.
And Laura, the interviewee from the community here on the This American Life story, said that when they were like, well, what do you think about that? Essentially, she said it was really funny to her that bus drivers were scared.
Well, that tells you something, that she doesn't feel bad at all. Like shit's got to be pretty fucking bad for them.
Yeah.
For her to like not give a shit, you know.
And they asked her like, and they asked her if she could say something to Diana, what she would say, and she said she would congratulate her.
Wow. Okay, so these women have fucking had enough.
Yeah. No, when women are, comment on this, and other cases as well, they're like, fuck those bus drivers. So it's like, okay, I don't want to say like, sit here and totally say like, well, no, all bus drivers. What if that one was nice? Because the women are telling us none of them are.
Yeah, they're like, no, this
Yeah.
is fine. Like, there's no way that she made a mistake, even if they didn't like explicitly do something that we know about.
Right. Like, and even if that's not the case, like, they're just so fucking mad that this symbolic act, like, is
Right.
rad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
gnarly,
so
though.
it's super weird, but we haven't heard anything from Diana as Diana since these murders. I hope she wasn't murdered herself, but you never know.
Yeah, she might have disappeared just by happenstance.
Living there.
Yeah.
There's no evidence, like I said, that these bus drivers are guilty, but she could either know something more than we do, or she's going for something symbolic. And either way, like I said, like the killers of Aku Yadav, I talked about in the first case, they're just, people are so desperate that like anything happening that looks like justice is like, hell yeah. You know?
They're like fine with it. They're happy to have it.
Yeah. And it's just, Juarez is a super frustrating situation. I know there's problems with cartel violence and cartels being involved with the police like writ large in Mexico, but Juarez is like this like extreme microcosm where people know it's happening and no one fucking cares.
Nobody does a thing about it. Yeah.
Finally, there's a post-hardcore band, which I have to admit I don't know what that means, called Less Art, that released a song called Diana the Huntress. And I'm sure I wouldn't like the band, but I like this lyric, which they took from her, quote, "I am an instrument. This is a warning to those that think we are weak."
Damn. Okay. I like that.
Like, I mean, she's pretty metal. You know, I'm not going to sanction the murders, but she is pretty metal.
She is pretty metal. Yeah. I mean, that's what happens when people get fed up, you know?
They get metal. Yeah.
They do. They get very metal. Jesus, dude.
Yeah.
Woo. Okay. You're right. That was a little short, but not really, but it was also quite punchy.
Punchy. Yeah.
Jesus. Well, that wraps those up. What are we doing next week?
Oh yeah. So I've been binge watching over the holiday season, See No Evil, a Discovery ID show that I love very much. And inspired by that, I want to do one about surveillance footage and other kinds of footage, solving crimes. Kind of like, whoops, you're caught on camera, bitch.
I like that.
And I know we're not a video show, but maybe we can post, stills or clips or something.
Mm-hmm. That'd be awesome. Yeah. I like that. It's like Candid Camera, but for murder.
Yeah, but for murder.
Yeah. Okay.
Check it out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We just got a fuck ton of new Instagram followers because we posted about the Idaho murder dickhead, Ryan Koberger. I also did a TikTok. I think I talked about how annoying that was. That's why I don't do them very often, but there is one up there. Thanks everybody for listening and following and sharing us with your friends. It's been a wild ride. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
And until the next list,
stay
off our